Hello everyone and welcome to part 2 of our lesson on farming and biodiversity. I'm Jenny and I'm here again with Lewis from the Field Studies Council and Ed who runs the Isle Farm here in Shropshire. On Monday we showed you how to set pitfall traps so that you could investigate species richness in your local area. And today we're going to be showing you how to analyse and to classify the data that you find. So we've been joining in with the investigation with you at home and we've been collecting data over the last 24 hours. So we're really excited to show you what we found. But after we've shared our data with you, there's going to be some opportunities to ask questions. So if you'd like to interact with the session and you'd like to get involved, then please do use the contact information on the screen now and ask any questions that you'd like to know about biodiversity. Okay, so let's, without further ado, we're going to go straight to Lewis and we're going to find out what we've managed to collect in our pitfall traps overnight.
Yeah, I'm excited. Hopefully we've caught something. This was the pitfall trap from site number 1. That was our higher human influence area. So that's the area where Ed is actively producing food.
Okay.
And it was more bare, less vegetation. So with our hypothesis, we expected this to have a lower species richness, but you never know what you might find. Oh, I'm seeing some things already.
Oh, great.
So we tip it out nice and gently.
Oh, there's a massive one there. Look on the side of the pot. He's just crawled back in.
Oh, they're tricksy. They can be. So we can see just here.
Oh wow! What's that? What's that big one?
So I'm seeing 4 legs or 2 pairs per segment of the body and a very rounded body and quite shiny. So I think this is a millipede.
Oh gosh, wow.
So the ID guides that we sent out should be helpful if you're having any trouble identifying these invertebrates. But the millipede was on there. What else might we have in here? So I see a little guy. Where is he?
Oh,
crawling this way with very long antennae. I'm pretty sure that is a species of springtail.
a springtail.
Yeah.
So why are they called springtail? Is that their official name or is that a nickname?
Their scientific name is Collembola.
Okay.
That's the order that they are in. They're actually not insects according to current biological theory. They're a hexapod all of their own, so something with 6 legs but that isn't an insect.
Okay.
And the reason they're called springtails is you can't see it because it's quite small, but they have a specialised organ underneath their body called a furcula, which is like a spring that's always held in tension. And whenever they want to jump away from a predator, they can release that tension and jump 7-8 inches in the air. And the kinds of things that predate springtails, let's go back to something that's not moving, but the kinds of things that predate springtails are guys like this ground beetle here, perhaps wasps, ants, that sort of thing, and they all have quite a short field of view.
Okay.
So to them it might appear that the springtails simply disappeared and just flown away.
So it has like a secret kind of part that can help it to spring away from its
the
predators.
furcula. And we can see there's lots of different species of springtail in here, which I'm hopefully I will be able to. There's another one. You see that?
Oh wow! So that's the springtail, but just a smaller one.
That's a different species of springtail, exactly.
Oh,
and
wow.
right behind him, another springtail.
And they all have this circular thing that helps them to avoid predators.
They all have that furcula. That's the common thing. And powering through the springtails there is a Rove Beetle.
Oh gosh.
He's running quite fast, probably out looking for his prey.
So this is a different, it's still a beetle, but it's a different shape of beetle to the first one.
Exactly,
that we
So
saw.
these have an elongated body. These are almost the lions of the savannah of the invertebrate world. These are out hunting actively all through the night and will eat most of the things that we found here in our tray. So I'm going to fill out my species richness form here for the first site.
Okay.
We've seen a fair few springtails. There's a good old Rove Beetle there. We've got... Did we have any ground beetles? Oh, he was hiding.
Is that the ground beetle is the big one, is it?
Yeah, so they're large, often quite shiny black beetles.
Right.
And they have a specialist defence mechanism. They can spray noxious chemicals at things. So if anyone found those at home, you might have found that maybe there was a bit of a smell in the air.
And that's just another way that they protect themselves from predators.
Exactly. Yeah, they protect themselves because they're not just predators themselves, they are prey to larger animals.
Yeah, looking at that millipede running away. From the farming point of view, go back to your springtails, what do they actually do? What benefit do they do the soil, the environment on the farm here?
So springtails are primarily something we call a detritivore. So that means they eat detritus or waste. So decaying organic matter and leaves and grass, that sort of thing. They're breaking that down, and that's a first step in the process of carbon cycling and nutrient cycling on the farm.
So that makes absolute sense from my point of view. If I want to grow crops, I need all these guys working together to provide the nutrients for those crops to grow in a sustainable manner, giving us plentiful food.
Yeah, and you might be surprised by how many we've found in terms of the springtails, but I found out the other day that in the right conditions, an acre of land can have 30 million springtails on it.
Wow.
God, that's brilliant. That's a lot of springtails across the farm, hopefully.
Seeing a little drop in the ocean here, really.
Yeah.
So in terms of our species richness, I see springtails, ground beetles, millipede, and Rove Beetle. So we would have a species, and springtails, of course. We would have a total species richness for the first site of 4. So that's 4 different categories of organism that we've seen, that we found. I wonder if we'll find anything different in the other area.
So just to recap, the second site, that was the site that had less human impact, didn't it?
Yes, so this is where Ed had planted pollinator-friendly plants, and there was lots of ground cover for insects to hide from predation and to find shelter. So we would hope, and we would maybe predict, that would have a higher species richness.
Yeah, okay.
But there's only one way to find out.
Take that for you. Let's get a new tray on the job.
It's down here. So, this is the pitfall trap from site number 2, the lower human influence area. I wonder if we'll find anything different.
Oh, there's loads. Oh gosh.
So if we didn't get a good shot of the ground beetle before, hopefully we can show it now. We found 2 ground beetles in here. Oh, it's like a horror movie, isn't it? Crawling around.
It is a little bit.
So we found 2 beautiful big ground beetles in there. For our study, those count as the same species.
Okay, so you would just note that down as just one then?
We would note, we're going to note down that we found 2 of them, but in terms of a species richness score, because that category we've got there is ground beetle, we're going to say that that's a species richness of 1. What else can we find in here? Oh, that's interesting. So, see, that's the problem with these cryptozoans. Remember I said that was Greek for hidden animals? They really do like to hide.
I can't see on the screen even. Are these really, really...
there we go.
Oh gosh, wow.
So that's a little centipede. So it's different to our millipede. It's got more outward facing legs, and it's going to have probably about 30 legs
30
as opposed
legs.
to our millipede, which will have a few more.
So how many legs? Do millipedes actually have 1,000 legs?
That's a good question. They don't actually have 1,000 legs, unfortunately. Yeah, millipede is Latin for 1,000 legs, centipede for 100 legs, but centipedes tend to have around 30.
Okay.
and millipedes it varies a lot more. Tends to be somewhere from around 36 up to 400
Oh
legs.
wow, okay.
But the lowest number of any species is 22.
Right.
And so even less than most centipedes.
Yeah.
And the highest number is 750. There's a species of millipede in California, that has 750 legs.
Gosh.
Which is the most legs of any animal, I'm pretty sure.
So it's a slight over-exaggeration. I think,
Certainly some springtails in here too. Yeah, it's definitely an exaggeration. And we also, as there's so much variation, you can't use that as a way of identifying it. Oh, and a little spider. These are becoming increasingly difficult to catch on the camera. So I'll take my species richness measurements now. We found a centipede.
I just saw a really tiny thing as well. It's disappeared. Maybe it was one of those hidden.
I think it was a springtail. Yeah, we've seen a couple of those jumping around. They really do go from 0 to 60 in no time at all. And we found a small spider as well, didn't we? So on this site we found some ground beetles, some spiders, a centipede and some springtails. So again, we're seeing a species richness of 4.
Right, okay. So this wasn't what we expected to find, was it?
Not necessarily. My personal hypothesis for this experiment was that the areas with lower human influence and less intensive use of the land would have a higher species richness. You'd expect this because there's more of a refuge for those creatures that Ed's created for them to inhabit. There's lots of reasons why we might have found this result instead.
Okay.
For starters, this is only one night or one day of 1 year. It's a very isolated snapshot of what was going on at that time.
Of course, yeah.
And only one pitfall trap, of course, in each site. So we're seeing an idea of what the patterns might look like, but to reinforce that and to have a statistically significant result, we'd need to combine many studies over a longer period of time. It's also quite cold this time of year, so it's possible that we had a bit of a cold snap last night and insects were slightly less active. And the ones that were active ended up being caught in all of the different pitfall traps. And I remember Ed mentioning yesterday, Monday, that he's trying to use these wild areas to repopulate the more heavily farmed areas. So this could be an indication that that's working. And that these creatures have come from the wild areas and ventured into the more heavily farmed areas to give us that similar species richness.
Because the sites were quite close together as well, weren't they?
They were quite close together, probably enough for a ground beetle to run away the speed that they're going in there.
They're moving very quickly on this tray. So are there any other limitations from this? We need to get good data, we do need to repeat measures, so we need to find an average of a couple of different trials, don't we? And is there anything else?
So this was a relatively simplified study. To make it easier to gather a large amount of data from across the country and analyse it in an effective way. If we were doing this as proper ecologists and trying to understand exactly what diversity existed, we'd firstly have identification on a species level. I've written things here like ladybird or rove beetle or ground beetle, but within ground beetles themselves there's 4,000 species.
Wow, really?
So while we have 2 ground beetles here, one of which is trying to attack the microscope as we speak, we've counted that as one species for the purposes of our study, but that could be 2 different species and that could up our species richness score. So a more specific, pardon the pun, list of species would make this a less of a limited study.
So it's a good snapshot, but we could extend it by making it more specific.
And it's a really good sort of pump priming project to get an idea of that baseline of diversity that we have here, and then you go from this to design a more rigorous experiment to fully understand. Because we're not just trying to understand the diversity of creepy crawlies walking along the ground, we're missing with the pitfall trap things that burrow, things that fly, things that are in puddles of water that might be on Ed's land. So
and things that potentially could jump back out again.
exactly,
So, yeah.
those springtails can jump up to 8 inches in the air. So we could have well lost a few of those over the night. So it's really important we consider the limitations to any experiment, even if it seems like it's perfect, because there's always ways that you can improve and give a more reliable, representative result.
Yeah. So what do we do once everybody has analysed their whatever they've caught? What's the ethical thing to do now with the creatures that we've found?
Well, as we were just mentioning, these have very specific ecological roles. So those springtails are there to break down detritus. The ground beetles help predate pests that Ed has, such as slugs and snails. So it's really important we put them back in that habitat,
Right.
because that's where they've chosen to live, that's where they're adapted to live, and that's where they can give us the most benefit as invertebrates. So what I'm going to do now is take these away and gently tip them back into the area where we found them.
Okay.
I'll take a little paintbrush with me because some of them look like they might want to cling on.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much, Lewis. That's fantastic. And what that's told me is that, one, it looks like putting the wildlife zones on the farm, letting nature actually take a place on something, is actually helping my other areas and their ecological part and the biodiversity in the soil itself. Two, the other thing that's come really apparent is that I need outside help in actually identifying what my natural capital is on the farm, exactly what I have here. Many things which, whilst I know they're there, I've never really stopped to consider it, and we've got to really burrow down on that information and that species richness. And if we can get that baseline study right across the farm, then if we then compare figures as we go over the years going forwards, then actually we'll know if we are moving in the right direction. But that was fascinating. Thanks very much.
It really was. So we're going to do some of the questions that we've had coming in now while Ed goes and while Lewis goes and takes the creatures back. Ed, I've got a question for you. Is there something came in? Is there anything that government can do to help preserve biodiversity?
I think that the policymakers have got a really central role to help us in the agricultural community to actually support the biosphere, which is this country, the life support system, the food production, the nature, clean water, all those things. And what our policymakers can help is to actually put a framework in place which actually supports people who are not only producing food, because that's what we do as farmers, but also makes allowance for us to actually support the natural environment as well. And so we mustn't just concentrate on producing food, but we've got to look at a more holistic approach in the way that we do farm for the future. And we allow nature to help us as well. And we've got to make space for nature. And that, again, comes in with support financially and also the expertise, but also there is the encouragement to adopt decent practices.
And another one was, how can we help biodiversity at home?
Well, I think everybody here has got a really important role with that. And I'm going to bring a couple of examples in with me, which I have got here. And I've got a bowl of apples, which I'm going to put on the table, and 3 bowls of soil. And the bowl of apples, that represents all the food that we actually consume in the United Kingdom ourselves. And this bowl of apples here is produced from the soil, the topsoil, our life support system across the country. Now, the really shocking thing, and I find it as a farmer really depressing, is that from those 3 apples, I'm going to take one and I'm just going to throw it away, because we waste ourselves about a third of the human calorific value in the food from farm to fork. And that waste has a direct effect on our ecology and our ecosystems. So all that soil is going to produce crops and life, but as we've taken one apple away, this last one here has just been completely wasted. And again, I can take that aside. And in fact, worldwide, this topsoil, which is a finite resource, we waste and lose about 24 billion tonnes a year. And this is partly due to our waste, partly due to bad practice with growing the food. And if we can bring in more ecologically sound ways of producing food, then we can start to save all the biodiversity contained. So by not wasting food, not only can we feed the whole world there, but what we can also do is improve the natural environment that we have. And I'm going to pick up another leaf here and put it in there, because what we're going to try and do is actually farm with nature, not in spite of nature. And in the future, if we can move forward to a sustainable and regenerative method of food production, then actually we can not only save this bit of the planet, we can also work with nature on the food producing side, and with that extra apple which we haven't wasted, means that we can feed the whole of the world's population going forward.
You've kind of touched on this with the answer that you've just given there, but somebody's asking, how do you balance encouraging insects with protecting crops from insects?
That is a challenge, because always we have perceived insects as part of the problem. But what we're now understanding is that by working with the insects, actually we can use the natural cycles to enrich our whole environment. And one of the things that we're keen to do here is to move away from all the inputs that we put on to grow the crops, and actually use nature to break down all those nutrients that we need and actually provide it in a sustainable manner.
Yeah. So it's working in partnership, isn't it?
Working in partnership.
Oh, good timing, Lewis. I've got a question for you now.
Oh, excellent.
Is the diversity of species type more or less important than species diversity? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot with that
The
question.
diversity of species type.
More or less important than species diversity?
So, do you remember on Monday we spoke about species diversity as being quite a multifaceted thing, of which the number of different species you find, or species richness, is just one element. So it's really good if you can find lots of different kinds of species where you are, but that isn't the entire picture as far as biodiversity and even species diversity goes, because species evenness is also a really important factor. If we have a scenario where, let's say, Ed's fields were completely overrun with ground beetles, but still had a few rare things like the odd springtail or the odd millipede, that's still a diverse habitat, but the evenness isn't there.
Yeah.
We've got one or two dominant species, and there's probably not going to be enough of the rarer species to fulfill their role in the ecosystem. So I feel like while both are important, it's important to remember that there are many aspects to biodiversity, and that each one needs protecting in a different way.
Okay.
And needs to be taken into account when we're making decisions.
And so, sort of following on from that, are there any particular insects that are more important to find?
Well, that'll depend a lot on the area. So somewhere like this, where Ed's trying to encourage nutrient cycling and topsoil regeneration, those detritivores are really, really important. But maybe if you are in a place where there is a great deal of pest problems, so lots of aphids or thrips that suck the sap out of useful crops, you might be wanting to encourage predatory beetles, so ladybirds and rove beetles and such. So the types of organisms that are useful, and that's useful in a sort of a selfish sense that we're saying, is going to depend a lot on which sort of ecosystem you're looking at.
Right. And so is there, can you make a prediction about like different areas of the country that what people, if the children are doing it at home, what sort of results do you think they'll find? Do you think they're going to find similar results to us, or what would be your prediction?
I think, I feel like all of these answers I'm saying it'll depend. I don't want to.
But as we said, ecology is a messy business.
Yeah,
isn't
that's
it?
the thing with biology. And ecology. It's messy, and sometimes it doesn't quite make sense. And that's part of the fun, is trying to understand why things are the way that they are. But in terms of results across the country, we're more likely to see higher diversity in areas that are warmer longer. So, and places that are maybe milder in the winter months. So places by the coast, especially the southwest in Cornwall and Devon, tend to have a much higher diversity of invertebrates than more northern areas. But that's not to say that we won't find things there. There's species of springtail, for example, called snow fleas, that you can see in the snow. They're perfectly adapted to extremely cold temperatures. So anywhere and any time that you do this sort of experiment, you are likely to find something.
Great. Well, following on from that, please do keep, if you do have a chance to have a go with this investigation, then please do send us in the data that you collect, because we would all really love to hear about it. But I think that's all we've got time for, unless there was anything else that you...
I'm going to just come in really, really quickly.
Yeah, that's fine.
3 points from my perspective as a farmer. And what I touched on was the food waste, and it's really depressing. For every trailer load of wheat that goes off the farm, I know that 1/3 of that statistically is going to be wasted. And what I'm going to do is, it's what you can do to help us across the country and around the world. The first thing is not to waste food. If ever you can, don't waste this precious resource which we're growing. Second thing, and we always do it, is we'll produce a little bit of waste from the kitchen. And here I've got banana, egg, some tea bags, bit of onion. So that's the compost bin. So if you do and are in a position to do some composting and your local authority picks it up, please do put the compost in, because what we're doing already on the farm here is we take the waste from our local town and we compost it down, and that's a totally natural biological process. And here we are, we've got really delicious organic compost, and what we can do is to spread that back onto the land. And what we're getting is a really good sustainability loop, where we're actually taking a waste product or a byproduct here, we're turning it around, we're putting it back onto the soil in compost and producing really good quality food with it. And this helps with my soil biodiversity. The third thing, which is really important, is get involved. Without clean water, we don't last very long. Without food, good quality food, we can last a little bit longer. And you are the future generation coming up. You are going to be looking at it through clear eyes. And certainly my industry, farming, producing food, but the whole of the food chain, which gets growing the seed on the farm, harvesting it, collecting it, transporting it, turning it into foods that you would buy in the shops, and the retail thing, needs your involvement in it and your eyes. And certainly from my farm here, I'd like to see as many of you getting involved with the food chain and bringing your fresh ideas into it. And another thing which we don't often think about is that whilst we produce food in the surrounding area, we produce food across the country to a high and ethical standard, making space for not only growing the crops, but also the all-important nature as well. Quite often we'll see food which regrettably from other parts of the world is not produced to the same standards. And you must play your parts, and it will be really helpful for our sustainability if you actually think about the food, think where it's coming from, think about the impact on the planet. Don't change your habits, don't change your way of life, but always consider what your impact is on the planet, on the countryside, on our biosphere, this beautiful world that we live in, which keeps us all alive. We've got to tread carefully, try and keep our footprint as small as possible, but we've also got to think about producing good quality food which is at an affordable price for all to pay or to buy.
And speaking of getting involved, I'd like to say that a really good way to get involved, obviously slightly biased, but is to talk to the FSC. So on our website we've got a load of fantastic resources for identifying anything from some lichen to trees to the invertebrates we found. This is a great little woodland name trail that we produce that you can use to identify most of the sorts of creatures that you might find, and maybe even ones that I didn't include in the ID guide earlier. And we're really all about bringing outdoor education and outdoor experiences and adventure to all, and trying to instill that feeling of belonging to the biosphere and that feeling of responsibility for the ecosystem that we live in into people of all ages. So if you've enjoyed the last two lessons and getting your hands dirty and finding invertebrates under things, I certainly have, check out the FSC website for some more resources where you can continue your studies.
I think that's a really nice note to end on. So thank you so much to everyone who's joined in with us today and on Monday. If you'd like to join us again tomorrow, we're going to be doing our last live lesson in our COP26 series, and it's all about the carbon cycle. So do tune in for that tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. But until then, it's bye from me and bye from everyone here at the Isle Farm. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.